Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to make a fun exploding box card with Lawn Fawn Build a House dies. Hope you enjoy. So to make this exploding box card, I started by creating some houses with the Build a House die. So for each house, I used a piece of paper that's slightly bigger than the die, and I decorated it the color of my house. So in this card, I used some barn door distress oxide as the base color. And then I used the brick stencil from Lawn Fawn and some vintage photo distress oxide to add some brick detailing. And if you're using a stencil that's quite detailed like this one, it makes it a lot easier if you have one of these soft bristle brushes. As you can see, it doesn't bend the stencil and you get just enough control to add in the detail that you want. Just gorgeous. And I'm going to repeat this 7 more times off camera. Now for the other detailed pieces, I'm going to use some Distress Oxide in ground espresso, and that will be for the outline pieces. So for example, the rectangular piece, the awning piece, the window outline, and the L-shaped piece. I'll show them here face up for your reference. Also for the door and the concrete step, I'm going to use some weathered wood. And this color is perfect because it looks like concrete. Now if you wanted to make this card a little bit faster, you could always use colored paper. And I did end up using some colored paper for some of the pieces. For example, I used it for the doorknobs. I used some black card. And for the flower pot, I used craft card. For the flowers, I used this glittery blue card. And for the inside of the flowers, I used this beautiful glittery white card. Also a bit of this yellow for inside the windows. So I cut enough pieces for 8 houses altogether. Now for the main outside of my exploding box, I'm going to have to fully assemble 4 of the houses. I glued in most of the pieces except for the inside of the window. I just used a bit of washi tape for that. And I did customize this house a little bit, so I didn't use all the pieces from the die set. You could always add a second window on the bottom, and the flower pot and the flowers are from the spring add-on set. They don't come in the main Build a Die set. So you can always customize this for whoever is getting the card. The color of this house kind of reminds me of a schoolhouse, and I think it would make a great teacher card as well. So one thing to be careful of when you're gluing it together, just try not to get the glue onto the actual house itself where the Distress Oxide is, because you might get some marks from it. So you could always wipe off the extra glue and make sure you're using a tiny nozzle. So for the lid of the exploding box card, you're going to need 4 half houses. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but only worry about the top of the house. Going to add in the picture frame window and the roof piece, and then I'm just going to cut it in the middle there. You want it to be 2 inches long, but you'll see how this works later on in the video. So altogether you should have 4 half houses and then 4 full houses. So this is a lot of work for this card, but you'll see when it comes together, it is a wonderful special card to give to someone. Now to make the windows shine a little bit more, I'm using some Nouveau drops. This is in the yellow bird color, and I'm just putting that in the inside of the window. And after it dried, I added some glossy accents on top. So for the card base, you need 1 piece that's 2 by 2 and 4 hinges. Now these hinges are 1 inch by 1 3/4 inches, and I'm just going to score each hinge in the middle there. So they're scored at 1/4 inch. And these paper hinges will be a lot sturdier than something like washi tape. So now I just trimmed off the side pieces on each of the houses, and I zoomed out here so you can see how I put it together. So I'm just going to line up the 4 outside houses and then use those hinges and glue the base to each of these 4 houses. Now don't worry about what we see, where we see the washi tape, because we'll cover that up shortly and make the inside of the exploding box card a little bit more spectacular. And because I'm using wet glue, I'm just going to hold each of the hinges in place for a few seconds until I'm convinced that it is stuck down properly. And then once you attach all 4 hinges, you can see the exploding box card is starting to take shape. And you can fold up the 4 houses and it explodes just like that. Now for the inside of the card, I cut 3 houses from one of the pieces from the Watercolor Wishes paper pad. And then the 4th house I cut with plain white paper, and that's where I'm going to put my sentiment. Now I'm just going to use some washi tape to add in those windows and just tape each one in place, and then I can glue these houses onto the inside of the card. Now adding these houses on the inside of the card also helps to add a little bit of weight so that when the recipient takes off the lid, the card will fall open. Now before I glue in the last house, I'm just going to stamp a sentiment on it. So I used one from the Totally Awesome stamp set, and this just says congrats. And then once I've stamped that, I'll glue that 4th house into place, and I can write my sentiment on the bottom of that panel there. Now to give this a nice finished look, I'm also going to cut another piece of that pattern paper, which is 2 by 2 inches, and I'll glue that onto the bottom. And that covers up the hinges and gives it a nice finished look. Now for the inside of this card, I used 3 of the little stamps from the Tiny Friends stamp set. And I used a little bit of acetate, which is just shy of 2 inches wide. And I just folded this in half, so it's kind of an L shape. And I know it's hard to see on the camera there. And I'm just going to use that as a means of propping up those 3 little tiny friends. So I'm going to glue them onto that acetate ledge. And then when the recipient opens up the card, they will be standing up. And this is the Lawn Fawn acetate that I'm using, so it's quite thick and it will hold its shape well. So now to add a bit more interest to the inside of the card, I die cut 3 hearts from the Scallop Circle gift tag set, and using these little tiny bits of acetate, I made little stilts for them. And I made sure that each one was less than 2 inches long, so that when the card is folded, the hearts will disappear completely. And you'll see when I fold it up in a second what I mean. And I just spaced them out separately so that they wouldn't bump into each other. So one on the right, one on the left, and one directly behind the 3 friends. And then when the card is folded, the 3 hearts won't bump into each other, as you'll see here. And I'll just set this aside to dry completely and work on the lid. So for the lid piece, I used a piece of card that's 9.5 inches by 2 inches, and I just scored this at every 2.25 inches. So I scored this 4 times, and the last time I scored it, it left me with a little bit on the end, which is a 1/2 inch. And that will be the bit that we add the glue to. And then for the top, I used a piece that's 3 by 3, and I just scored this at every 1/4 inch. And you can see the inside of the top is 2 inches by 2 inches. So to assemble this, I just folded on the score lines and then just added a slit on each of the 4 corners, just one. And that way I can glue it in place to make it three-dimensional. And then the other piece, I just folded into a square, and you can see I need to add a little bit of glue onto that tab piece. And you can see our cube is starting to take shape. Now for the lid piece, I'm just going to glue in those tab pieces on all four corners. And then we can glue the lid into the other part of the cube. Now this is a bit fiddly, but I found it best if you add the glue on the outside of the lid and then squeeze the lid into the rest of the cube. And it might be a little bit tight, so I ended up turning it upside down and then using my pokey tool just to make sure that it was all lined up perfectly. But it gives you a really nice sharp edge on your lid. Now once I was happy with my lid, I set it aside to dry for a few moments, and then I added on the 4 half house pieces. And I just used glue to attach these. Now because the box is only 2 inches deep, the house pieces hang off the end a little bit. So once I had attached 2 of them, I just trimmed those with my scissors. Now you could always decorate this lid a bit further if you like, but because the houses are so close together, you don't have much room behind them. But you could always add a sentiment on the top, it's up to you. Now I did think that my card needed a sentiment on the outside. So what I did is, after attaching these 4 houses to the lid and trimming off the excess pieces, I used that same scallop circle gift tag set from before and die cut the little tag. And it's just big enough that I could fit the word congrats on it. And that's from that same stamp set, the Totally Awesome set. I just heat embossed this off camera to save time. So once I had attached the little ring onto the tag, you can see it will look really nice on the outside. So I'm just going to fold up the exploding box card, add on the lid, and then I can use a bit of twine to attach this together. Now to keep this twine from getting lost, I thought it would be a good idea just to use a bit of washi tape to tape it on the bottom so that when the recipient opens the exploding box, the twine doesn't get lost, so they can always put it back together again if they prefer. I'm just going to add that tag onto the twine and then just put a knot on the end to keep it on there. And I was going to use 2 of the tags, but I think 1 is perfect. And you can see that finished exploding box card. So the recipient will open it and it will say congrats on the inside, and then they can fold it up again when they're finished. And I just love how this turned out, perfect for a new house owner. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!